On today's mailbag show, has Clemson become a rivalry game? And could this end up being like the Louisville game? Plus, why Micah Shrewsberry has made an excellent first impression as the Notre Dame men's basketball coach. That's all coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Friday, November 3rd. So happy Friday, and thanks for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And this episode of Locked On Irish is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We got another mailbag on the books today, and then I wanted to talk a little men's basketball at the end because it's been a really long time since I talked some hoops on this podcast, but Micah Shrewsberry had an awesome quote after Notre Dame defeated Hanover in their first and only exhibition before the season gets going here. So we'll cover that all at the end, but first let's get to the mailbag questions, and our first one comes from @BigRed47. Where does Clemson rank amongst our top 10 rivals? This is a really interesting question because I've been thinking about this for a while. Is Clemson even maybe number one? But I think that's obviously a little bit steep right now. So number one is obviously USC. Like, even though USC had been down before Lincoln Riley came over, they are Notre Dame's biggest rival. They've been for a really long time, and they will continue to be so long as they play every year on the schedule. That seems like it's going to be the case. It's not the case right now for Notre Dame's second biggest rival, Michigan, because there's certainly a lot of animosity between the Notre Dame and Michigan fan bases. They're very close to one another. They're somewhat like-minded universities, although I'm sure that both institutions would argue against the other. But still, Notre Dame doesn't play Michigan on a yearly basis, so until they start playing on the field over every single year, I should say, then they're definitely number two. I think USC definitely has the top spot. And number three is where it gets interesting, because then you got a bunch of other schools who Notre Dame doesn't play every single year, but there's certainly a lot of hatred between the fan bases. I would put Michigan State number three, even though Notre Dame hasn't played them in a while. It felt like when they do play, it's always very tense and usually ends up being a great game, even if one team is clearly superior than the other. Boston College has got to be in there as well. The backup college, I should say, even though Boston College hasn't ever really been at the level Notre Dame has been historically in football. They always seem to play spoiler. Don't have to bring up 1993 or 2002, but you see my point there. And then I honestly would put Clemson there right after Boston College. I know that's recency bias. It definitely lacks the history and tradition of like a Navy or Purdue or Pittsburgh. But when you look at the past 5 years, Notre Dame and Clemson has featured some all-time battles, including the 2020 regular season game. Then they smacked Notre Dame in the ACC championship that year. But then you consider what Notre Dame did to them last season. So I think that they're definitely in the mix now as one of the more recent rivals. If this was solely based on like traditional rivals, then Clemson wouldn't even have an argument in that case. But I think if you're looking at right now who I consider to be Notre Dame's biggest rivals, who I want to beat the most, Clemson's definitely got to be in there. And it looks like as long as Notre Dame has this open marriage, so to speak, with the ACC, they're going to continue to play Clemson on a regular basis. Some other teams, Florida State, Miami, at one point or another, they probably deserve to be in the mix, but these are the rivals as I see them today, and I think Clemson's going to continue to climb up that if they continue to play every year. Big Red 47 also wanted to ask, what is the real Death Valley? I will say, I think Clemson had it first. LSU started calling it Death Valley in 1959 after they beat Clemson to win the first national title in school history. And I think at the time they were calling it Death Valley with an F because it was so loud there. And then when they beat Clemson, they thought they could take the claim of Death Valley because by that point, Clemson was already calling Memorial Stadium Death Valley, and then they tried to claim it as their own, and they've been doing it ever since. So I think given the fact that Clemson did it first, they own the rights to that. But I will say LSU is probably considered the most hostile environment in all of college football, so LSU gets that as the consolation prize, even if they aren't the older Death Valley. Okay, this next one comes from my mother, who asks, do you think Clemson will come out like Louisville, and do you think Notre Dame will be ready? I can tell from this question alone that she's extremely nervous about the game on Saturday. Potentially. I think Clemson is going to come out ready to go. I think they're going to be fired up, especially after what Dabo was dealing with this week on the radio, arguing with Tyler from Spartanburg and really going at it. And again, like I've said this week, like I'm Team Dabo in that situation because I thought the way that Tyler approached that was just rude, and he deserved to get the response that he did. Now, if you want to make the case that Dabo shouldn't ever act like that because he's a college football coach and leader of the program, oh well. But he's an emotional guy, he's passionate, he's a college football coach. So I think he's going to have his guys ready to go on Saturday against Notre Dame. The fact that Notre Dame is coming to town is going to get any fan base riled up, so the fans are going to be riled up. And I just think Clemson is a prideful program, and they've got some really talented players, specifically on defense, and they're going to be ready to make a statement, especially considering the fact that Notre Dame absolutely dominated them last season. These guys care a lot, even if they're not going to make the college football playoff or even a major bowl game. They're prideful dudes. They're good football players. They're going to come up and they're going to compete in the game on Saturday. But I think in the end, Notre Dame just has more talent across the board, and they're going to be able to wear them down by the end. So I'm still taking Notre Dame to win 27-17. But if Clemson comes out and they take an early lead, I wouldn't be surprised. Louisville came out and they got a pick on the opening drive, and then they turned that into a score. So yeah, they were up 7-0 to start, but then things really slowed down, and Notre Dame actually had the lead in the third quarter. It wasn't like Louisville came out and blew the doors off Notre Dame from the jump. Notre Dame just could not get anything going on offense, and that came back to bite them in the end. So I definitely expect Clemson to put up a big fight on Saturday, but I don't think that it's going to be like the Louisville game and that Notre Dame won't have any idea what's going on. I don't expect them to fire off 4 different offensive line combinations. I think we've moved away from that, hopefully, but that actually leads me to my next question, which comes from at Philip F8978. Is Notre Dame the best offensive line Clemson has faced all season? I like the Irish line more than Florida State's. So I think the answer is yes. Notre Dame has the potential to be the best line Clemson will face all year, but will the Notre Dame offensive line play up to their standard? That's my biggest question. I think they have the most talent, but they haven't always played up to their full potential. And you could say that about the entire team, but specifically the offensive line, given the talent that's on that group. The Notre Dame offensive line has not looked good on the road. They really struggled at the beginning of the NC State game. They played terribly against Duke and Louisville. So this is a big opportunity for them to go on the road and sort of right their wrongs from previous games so far this season. They're certainly capable of it. We saw how they looked against Ohio State. We know that this can be a really good group. We know that Joe Walt is one of the best left tackles in the country. Blake Fisher has a ton of potential. Same with the guys on the interior, especially at guard. So I think it's still better than any team that Clemson has faced, even if they don't play 100% full potential, but they cannot come out like they did against NC State or Duke or Louisville and expect to win that game because Clemson is a really good front seven, and even if Notre Dame plays well, they're going to lose some reps because the guys that they're going against are just too good for them to dominate for the entire game. So Notre Dame has the edge in that matchup, in my opinion, but how far, or I guess how much they dominate that matchup, we're going to have to wait and see because so far this season, they just have not done that on the road like you would hope that they would do because when you're going on the road and your offensive line starts to dominate, then it sort of cancels out everything else. All the noise, all the hostile environment stuff kind of goes away when you can just run the ball all over the opponent. Notre Dame hasn't been able to do that at all this season, really, at least on the road, but I have a feeling that if the line can get going on Saturday, Notre Dame should be able to win this one with ease. All right, we've got more mailbag questions about the Clemson game and some other big picture Notre Dame stuff, so that's coming up right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you could stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all of the fun you're going to have. I actually just used Gametime this past weekend to attend a concert. Bought the tickets the day of the concert. It was an incredibly smooth process, and that's why I recommend it to all of my listeners. Gametime is the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And the tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Before we move on, I wanted to remind you to please hit the thumbs up button below and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review if you're feeling extra generous, and of course, subscribe. All right, let's get back to the mailbag questions here. This one comes from at Eric Ward 7499. Which offense is worse, Notre Dame or Clemson's? Kind of a harsh question, but I think Clemson is far worse than Notre Dame. I really don't think it's close, honestly. Let's look at the most important position, quarterback. Sam Hartman is way better than Cade Klubnik right now. I know that Sam Hartman did not have his best game against Pitt, especially starting off that game with 2 interceptions. That's unacceptable for any quarterback around the country. But then he bounced back, had a solid game the rest of the way, and I think overall, if you look at what he has done for this offense this season, he's really elevated the level of play for every position group on that unit, and I think he's so experienced in going into Clemson. He's 0-4 in his career against this team. So I think he's going to be ready to go. He's going to want to get this win, maybe more than any other player on the Notre Dame roster, because going 0-5 against one school, that's going to live with you forever. And he's already had some demons to exercise this year. He's done it with most of them, not with Louisville. That one's going to have to stick around forever. But I think Saturday is a big opportunity for him. And when you look at what Cade Klubnik has done this season, he's been the reason that Clemson has lost several games because of he's so turnover prone. It happened in the first game of the year against Duke, and it continued over the course of the season. And I think Cade Klubnik is one of those guys who has a ton of potential. Like, there's a reason he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. And I think there's still a chance for him at the college level. But right now, in 2023, he has just not been the quarterback that a lot of us thought he would be up to this point. And then you look at what DJ Uiagalelei, the guy that Klubnik replaced, what he's doing at Oregon State, it makes you think a lot about Klubnik's ability, because all of last season, Clemson fans and really all of college football fans were like, you got to play Klubnik, DJ is the problem. And then so far this season, it really hasn't been the case. It hasn't been the case, and you could argue that Clemson has an even better offensive coordinator this year than they did last year, because they have Garrett Riley now compared to Brandon Streeter. So Notre Dame has the clear edge there. And then if you look at running backs, I think if Will Shipley does play and he's at full health, then it's probably pretty close to a draw. I think Notre Dame has more depth in that room, and Wojciak Estime is obviously one of the best running backs in the country, but so is Will Shipley, and Will Shipley can do a bunch of different things in the same way that Wojciak Estime can. But without Will Shipley, then Notre Dame has the edge there by far. I mean, Phil Maffa is a good running back for Clemson, but Notre Dame has Estime, Jadarian Price, who's really been coming on lately, Jeremiah Love, Devin Fordkin, Bruce. I think it was Tyler James. Yeah, it was Tyler James who posted that video of Devin Ford just flying through the line of scrimmage, laying out dudes like a fullback in there. So he's another asset in that room. And then you got Jabron Payne in the short yardage situations who can make some plays too. So Notre Dame has the edge. Notre Dame has the edge at quarterback. They'll likely have the edge at running back, because I don't think Will Shipley is going to be 100% on Saturday. Tight end, without Mitchell Evans, I think Clemson has the advantage there. I think he's in Brenningstool. He's a really talented player on their offense, and even though Notre Dame has some good young tight ends, without Mitchell Evans, I give the edge to Clemson. Looking at the wide receivers, I think that's probably a draw. It's like the battle of mid, you could say. Neither wide receiver unit has been particularly impressive so far this season, but both teams have some guys who can make some plays. Hopefully for Notre Dame, Jane Greathouse is able to make some plays, because he's been dealing with that hamstring injury. Even though he played a lot more last week, he was targeted twice, didn't have any catches. I'd love to see Tobias Merriweather get some shots over the top, because as Pete Sampson said in yesterday's episode, which you should definitely go check out if you have not already, Clemson can be beat over the top. It's just a matter of whether or not Notre Dame can take advantage of that. And you would think that if there's any wide receiver on this Notre Dame roster who could take advantage of that, it's Tobias Merriweather and Chris Tyree, who I would not have guessed would be able to do that going into the season, but he's become one of Notre Dame's better deep ball threats. So give me a draw at wide receiver. And then at the offensive line position, I already kind of went over it in the first segment, but I think Notre Dame has the clear advantage there. Clemson's offensive line has really been struggling this season. It's part of the reason why Cade Klubnik has struggled, so it's not all on him. But even though Notre Dame has had some lapses for sure, I still think Notre Dame has the advantage there. So I'm going to take Notre Dame's offense over Clemson's offense 10 times out of 10 this season, which we have not always been able to say in the past. Okay. Next one comes from @X1103. Any chance we see Billy Schroth moving forward? There was a lot of buzz about him preseason, and I think most insiders are projecting him as a starter at guard. Really don't remember seeing him at all this season. Outside of an injury, I really don't think we're going to see Billy Schroth that much going forward outside of some mop-up duty. He has been in several games so far this season, coming in as a reserve when Notre Dame's had the game handled late in the fourth quarter. Shroth comes in with the second unit, and he actually played a little bit more in that Louisville game when Notre Dame was trotting out a bunch of different offensive line combinations. He even played some right guard in place of Rocco Spindler, so he's clearly been getting some reps in practice at both guard positions. But still, I think you want to keep the 5 starters out there for the entirety of the game until it's it's completely over by that point, and then you can bring in the 2s. But rotating guys in the offensive line, I just think sets you up for disaster. We saw it happen against Louisville. Why Notre Dame decided to do that on the road in a hostile environment when they were already down to begin with just made no sense to me at the time. And the offensive line was playing pretty poorly to begin that game, and then it got even worse once they tried doing this stuff. So I think Notre Dame is going to try to avoid that at all costs. Marcus Freeman has even said so in a couple recent press conferences. So I don't think Billy Shroth is going to come in unless there's an injury, although I would not write him off. And the reason that everyone projected him to start the season is because he was running with the 1s throughout spring practice and at the start of fall camp. So everyone just assumed that, okay, Billy Shroth is running with the 1s. He's going to start this year. At that point, he was beating out Pat Coogan on the depth chart despite the fact that he was younger. Then towards the end of fall camp, you start hearing that not only is Pat Coogan getting the majority of the reps at left guard, but Rocco Spindler is getting the reps at right guard instead of Andrew Kristofich. So those guys simply won the job. Maybe you can make the case that Billy Shroth didn't play that well and he lost it. I don't know. I wasn't at practice every single day. Neither were any of these other insiders, even if they were at some practices. So I would not write him off because Zeke Correll is likely going to be gone after this season. I think they're going to move Pat Coogan to center because we actually saw him play center earlier this year. And then I think Billy Shroth is going to come in and start at left guard. He's only a redshirt freshman, and typically Notre Dame offensive linemen really don't solidify their spots in the starting unit until their junior year. It's a really, really difficult position. You need to physically mature. And even though Billy Shroth was sort of mature beyond his years coming out of high school, he still clearly had a long way to go, and I think that the potential for him is still through the roof, and he could end up being a really great offensive lineman for Notre Dame. It's just going to take a little bit longer than we expected. Not everyone is a Quentin Nelson, who, by the way, even Quentin Nelson redshirted his freshman season and then started to get some action as a redshirt freshman, but still, I think Billy Shroth is a great opportunity at Notre Dame. I think we're going to see a lot more of him next year, so do not write him off just because he didn't play this season. All right, coming up next, we got some men's hoops to talk about and why I am so excited about the start of the Micah Shrewsberry era. This episode of Locked On Irish is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a skill-based, real-money daily fantasy sports game. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will do more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. PrizePicks adds a ton of excitement to the sports viewing experience. You can watch your progress update in real time, win up to 25 times your entry amount, and cash out your winnings with quick scoring, settling, and withdrawals. I've been playing PrizePicks recently. I have no idea why I waited so long, and my favorite part about it is that you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals and sharks. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege, code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports, made easy. All right, before we wrap things up here, I want to talk a little Notre Dame men's basketball because, as I mentioned off the top, the Notre Dame men's basketball team defeated Hanover in an exhibition. They won by like 30, and it was a good start to the Micah Shrewsberry era because the expectations for that group aren't particularly high from the national basketball media. I think they were predicted to come in dead last in the ACC this season. And look, I don't have super high hopes for this team either. They're extremely young. And as a matter of fact, before the Ohio State game, I went to this luncheon on Friday, and Micah Shrewsberry spoke at it. Golick Sr. and Golick Jr. were the hosts, and they were talking to Shrewsberry, and he just totally stole the show. Shrewsberry was funny, he was witty, and he also got me really excited about the Notre Dame men's basketball program. They asked him, like, how do you feel about this year? Like, what are your expectations? And Shrewsberry made this great joke about how his team is so young that in their first practice that was coming up, that they were going to have to take a break about an hour in for orange slices and juice box like they did when they were kids. So I thought it was great. He has the right mindset about this team. But after the exhibition, he had his press conference, and he gave this really, really great quote about why, or basically his pitch for Notre Dame students and fans to come watch this team play in the Purcell Pavilion, even if the wins and losses record isn't what we had hoped. All right, take a listen.
If you can't get behind this group, I don't know who you can get behind, right? Like these dudes, like I said, like we got good kids. We got really good kids, right? Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. We got really good kids. We got kids that committed to Notre Dame when a lot of other people bailed on Notre Dame, man, right? There was a lot of people who had an opportunity to stick around here. A lot of people we recruited had an opportunity to come here and be a part of this, and they said no to it because they didn't believe in what we were doing, right? But these kids did. They did. They believe in Notre Dame. They love this place, and they compete as hard as possible with that Notre Dame on their chest, man. Like, if you can't get behind that, I don't know what you can get behind, man. I don't know what you can get behind, man. I came here because this place, there's a purity to this place, right? I see people show up at a lot of places and the coaches are doing bad stuff, man. The players are doing bad stuff, and they show up and celebrate that. Like, if you can't get behind this group right here, like, then you know, you're not like us then. You're not like us, man. These are great kids, and you can support these kids, and you can be a part of this trajectory, right? Like, show up. If you don't show up, it means you're really busy or you believe that we're going to be 15th in the ACC. I don't prepare like we're 15th in the ACC. Not at all. I prepare like we're going to the tournament. I prepare like we're going to the national championship game. And that's how those guys give up their hearts every single day while still going to class, while still doing everything to be really good basketball players. But they're fighting for Notre Dame, man. Like, show up and support them in that same exact way. Just give us one chance. Just give us one chance. If you don't like us, don't come back. Don't come back. But if you do like us, you'll be like, man, I was here from the start when this thing takes off, because it's taking off. It's taking off, and it's taking off in a hurry.
Wow. That's all I have to say. I know that was kind of a long soundbite, but I wanted to share that with everyone who listens to this because it's got me pumped up. Like, I want to run through this brick wall that's right behind me right now because I am just so jacked up about the Micah Shrewsberry era for the Notre Dame men's basketball program. And we all know it's going to take some time, considering how young and inexperienced they are, and win the ACC or do some serious damage in the NCAA tournament. No one is expecting that. It's unfair. It's unrealistic. But when I listen to Micah Shrewsberry there, I get so much more excited about the future, and I have so much belief that he is the guy for this job because he recognizes the uphill battle that awaits him and that it's going to take a few years. It's not going to, Rome wasn't built in a day. They're not going to fix this overnight, but the people that he has on the team, on his staff, they believe in the cause, and they're going to do whatever it takes to right the ship here and get Notre Dame basketball to where it's supposed to be. I love Mike Bray. I absolutely love that guy. He was a great coach for some years at Notre Dame, but we can all admit that in the last few years, things have gone really south, and Notre Dame's in a position where they never should have been in the first place. And someone was going to have to come in and clean that up, and I was high on Micah Shrewsberry when they hired him. I'm even more excited about him now because hearing that quote, I just think he's so determined to get this program back to where it needs to be. And we all understand that Notre Dame is a football school. I think Shrewsberry gets that as much as anyone. But this team needs your support. And if you can make some games, I'd highly encourage you to do so because I think that this is the beginning. And as Shrewsberry said, they're going to get there. And it's going to be fun to be a part of it from the beginning because then once Notre Dame is making these deep runs in the NCAA tournament, we can look back on this season and be like, man, we really stuck it out. Because I feel like there's just so much more enjoyment as a fan when your team has success and you were there when things were really bad. I think that's the mark of a true fan for any team, not just Notre Dame, not just football, not basketball, any sport. Like if you're a part of the dog days and you're there when things suck and then when things get better at the end, it just makes it that much more enjoyable, and why fair weather fans and stuff like that bothers me more than anything. But I'm really excited for the Shrewsberry era to get going here, and I really got excited by that press conference. So that's going to be it for this episode. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day, and that's another week of Locked On Irish in the books. Enjoy the game tomorrow. I know it's going to feel a little weird starting at noon. I'm going to have to be up bright and early on the West Coast because the game is going to start at 9 a.m. local time for me. But I can't wait for this one. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys next week. Remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Irish, on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal Twitter account is at Tyler, WOJCIAK. Have a great weekend. I'll be back with you next week, and go Irish.